I have no self-esteem. I'm not saying I dislike myself or that I have a problem with my self-image, and I don't have low self-esteem. I'm just saying that I have no self-esteem at all.
Frankly, I don't think that's possible. One cannot regard oneself with complete indifference and then make videos for YouTube. You must have an opinion of your own self-worth if you're going to put your ideas out there where people can share them. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. A significant problem among people today is their sense of self-esteem, of self-worth. It gets in the way of productivity and can even lead to suicide. Now, while this video may, on its face, appear to be entirely secular, which is outside my usual subject matter, it's worth noting that Prager University, which is not, in fact, a school, is explicitly religious, and the presenter is a rabid and screaming Catholic conservative. Point being, this assault on self-esteem is being brought to us by people whose religion is based around martyrdom and excessive humility.
I'm just saying that I have no self-esteem at all. Why? For the same reason that I have no pet unicorns. Self-esteem is a fantasy. It's a meaningless fabrication that exists only in your imagination.
Do I have to explain why that's hilarious coming from a theist? Wow. Just wow.
The dictionary defines esteem this way: to regard with admiration. Self-esteem, therefore, means to regard yourself with admiration.
And what we have here is an example of some weapons-grade cherry-picking. Here's a crazy idea. Try looking up self-esteem in the dictionary. Wacky fact, it's in there.
If someone asked you who you admire, would you really want to answer, well, I admire myself? Would that be a good thing? I would say no, emphatically.
There are a couple of problems with what Skippy here is trying to say. First of all, why not admire yourself? If you deserve it, if you've earned it. If you've done a lot of amazing shit over the years, what's wrong with a little, hey, I'm awesome? But second, while one definition of self-esteem does describe getting a little too happy with the self-backpatting, another definition, the one more commonly used I've found, is simply having some realistic self-respect, a favorable impression of oneself, as opposed to feeling worthless. And if we're being told to not have that, I'm telling him to get stuffed.
I was hardly a precocious kid, but I think I realized this self-esteem thing was a racket as far back as junior high. I remember when the guidance counselor at my school handed out a worksheet and asked us to rate our self-esteem on a scale of 1 to 10. Meanwhile, kids in China were learning silly things like math and science. Now we're bankrupt and they own the country, but at least we all feel pretty good about ourselves.
Is he seriously trying to say that his school did a self-esteem quiz instead of math? And what kind of tinfoil hattery is this that China owns the country? We have our own 1% for that. Is anybody else starting to think that this guy's a bit of a loon?
In any case, there we were, facing the important task of arbitrarily quantifying our egos. When I asked my teacher why I should have high self-esteem, she said, because you're special.
Insert short bus joke here.
When I asked why I was special, she said, because you're you.
Lather, rinse, repeat.
I found this an odd statement at the time, coming as it was from the woman who had just given me a D on my last math quiz. Most of my classmates, though, quickly jotted down 9s and 10s. Incidentally, some of them would grow up to become unemployed alcoholics, but I'm guessing if they could take that test again, they'd score themselves exactly the same.
Oh, you're guessing. You're guessing. Did you bother to find out? And who says it wasn't true at the time? Maybe they did have high self-esteem during their school years, and then life wore them down bit by bit. That does happen, you know. And you'll notice he doesn't mention how many didn't become unemployed junkies, leaving us to imagine it was all of them. You'll pardon me, I'm sure, if I don't take this glowing report of his fellow classmates at face value.
See, that's the whole point of self-esteem. To be proud of yourself even when there's no reason to be proud of yourself. Of course, apologists will claim that self-esteem is simply about confidence.
Apologists? You mean people who actually took the time to look up the actual definition of the term. In fact, if one were to look up a more comprehensive definition of the concept, since dictionaries rarely tell the entire story, one notices that one's self-esteem can, in fact, be negative. Self-esteem is a self-evaluation, not self-aggrandizement. But worse, now he's talking about self-confidence, which is an explicitly separate topic. Self-confidence describes trust in one's ability to accomplish certain goals. What I can't tell is whether he's being dishonest or clueless. Those two can so easily look alike.
Okay, but if self-esteem is simply about confidence, then why don't we just call it confidence? Because confidence must be earned. A student is confident about doing well on a test if he studies for it. An athlete is confident on the field if he practices. A singer is confident in her abilities if she, in fact, has abilities.
Confidence isn't always justified or justifiable. Sometimes it's completely unfounded. But that's okay. If we were never confident in ourselves for no good reason, or with very little justification, we'd be too shit scared to try anything new. We'd never look at a challenge and say, hold my beer, I got this, and then succeed or fail, and learn something new in the process. And why do we call it self-confidence instead of confidence? Well, sometimes it's nice to be specific. Am I confident in myself, or am I confident in Sparky over there? Which one of us do I trust?
Self-esteem, on the other hand, can be defined as unearned confidence. The person with high self-esteem, also known as a narcissist, feels good about himself on the basis of nothing.
Now wait just a second. How is self-esteem, even high self-esteem, necessarily unearned confidence? Is it impossible to have earned that level of self-worth without it being narcissism? J.K. Rowling created a book and movie series that captivated the world, and she donated enough money to charity to make her no longer a billionaire. I think she deserves a rather generous helping of narcissism-free self-esteem, don't you? Just as an example.
Why do you esteem yourself? And his learned response will be, because I'm me. Like a modern-day narcissist, he can't see the world outside the window because he's too busy whispering sweet nothings to his reflection in the glass.
Because somebody who holds themselves in high regard never thinks of anybody else. If you have high self-esteem, you're the only one who matters. Uh-huh. Sure. That's definitely how this works. Right.
In a saner, less confused time, people saw it the opposite way. It didn't matter how you felt about yourself. It mattered what you did.
And those things aren't related? Can you point to nothing in this world about which you'd say, if I'd been in a different place in my life, I never could have done that? I, and just about everybody I know, has been in that horrible headspace where you just don't think you can manage anything, that it's all just too much for you. And then you look back now and realize you totally had that. You just didn't think you had it in you to bother trying. We've all been there. How we feel about ourselves does affect what we do. Our motivation, our so-called get up and go, just isn't there if we feel worthless or ashamed. Self-esteem matters.
I remember one time explaining very carefully to my dad that he couldn't expect me to do my math assignment because math made me feel bad about myself. In return, he suggested that maybe I should study more, and then math wouldn't make me feel so bad. But in the meantime, he said, it doesn't matter how you feel. Do your homework.
Frankly, I don't believe this story even slightly. I really don't. Does this sound like a conversation anybody's ever had, ever? I mean, maybe if he'd said something like, I can't do this, I'm too stupid. Okay, I could see a kid saying that if they were having trouble. But telling your pop that math hurts your feelings? Find me a kid who'd say that. And if you do find one, find me one who isn't bullshitting after taking that self-esteem course this guy talked about at the beginning. And show me how this changes the basic premise that self-esteem is important.
If this self-esteem thing was just another benign form of entertainment, we could just laugh it off. But it's become a serious problem because this I'm special, love yourself, you get points for breathing dogma taints everything it touches. It equips you for nothing.
How about equipping you for a world that would see you beaten down at every turn? Even if we ignore the people who try to destroy you, imagine trying to conquer life thinking you're worthless. The truth is that our self-esteem might actually be bullshit, but we need it in order to function, to gain the kind of self-esteem that is justifiable. If you really think about it, the more self-esteem we have, the less we need it.
Sure, insecurity and self-doubt can also be defeating, but at least there's a chance that they might drive you to be better. Self-esteem actually prevents improvement because you can only improve if you first acknowledge what you're not good at.
But this is completely backward. If all you have is insecurity and self-doubt, where is that drive going to come from? How do you even get started making yourself better unless you think you're good enough to try? You need self-esteem, or else you're paralyzed by fear and self-hatred. Again, self-esteem is not self-aggrandizement, and it's not narcissism. It's self-assessment. Acknowledging what you're not good at is part of the package, as is recognizing that you could be good at it.
I'm not saying that you should hate yourself, and I'm not saying that you should have low self-esteem. I'm saying have no self-esteem, as in stop thinking about it, period. Do good things with your life, and you'll have all the esteem you'll ever need.
From where? From other people? Are we to be attention whores? Do we beg for other people's approval? Thanks, but no. As great as it is having other people tell you you're awesome, and it is great, how useful is that in our lives if we don't feel the same way about ourselves? How many celebrities turn to drugs or alcohol, maybe commit suicide, despite being beloved by the public? What could be said about their self-esteem, I wonder? Esteem from everywhere else didn't seem to do any good, because they had none for themselves. If you have low or no self-esteem, hell, I'm not a shrink. I couldn't tell you what to do about it, and goodness knows I've had my own moments. But I can tell you that you need self-esteem, even if you're lying to yourself, because that's what you use to earn the real thing. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.
Even YouTubers need Ferraris. Please donate on Patreon.
A thumbs up for this video is a vote for excellence and glory. Subscribe to BionicDance and make the internet great again.